are some things that AI can't yet do. And one of them is rearranging the stage for a panel of 4 experts plus me. So we're going to pick up some of the discussion that we just heard with the Minister about inclusive AI. And just to introduce my panel, on my immediate left is Rama Chakaki, the President of Qatar Science and Technology Park, Ankur Kothari, co-founder of Automation Anywhere, Vinay Firake from Wipro, and at the far end, Abdulla Hamad Al-Misnad, the Chairman and Managing Director of the only just born QAI, which is an institution that I would actually ask him first of all to explain to us how Kai fits into the inclusive AI ambitions of Qatar.
That wasn't on the list of questions, but I'll take it. Look, the way we think about AI is, at the end of the day, the value, there's on the left-hand side, there's probably $1 trillion+ invested in infrastructure and capacity. The only way for the value to be found in these things is for businesses to adopt and deploy AI. And so there's a long way to go between transforming these hundreds of billions of dollars into actual business and corporate and economic development. And to go from here to there, there's a lot that we have to do to build on trust, assurance, and compliance, and regulatory compliance, and all the things that normal businesses care about. So when I use AI for my accounting, how do I know whether it really is following the accounting standards, it's following the right regulations? This is what we think of when we think of culture and alignment. So it's really the corporate alignment of the rules, policies, procedures, regulations, jurisdictional elements. So as multinational businesses, Qatar has, we're a small country of 3 million people, but our Qatari multinationals serve over 500 million people globally, and they operate in over 50 or 60 different jurisdictions. So as we think about how we're deploying AI at the corporate level, this AI has to work across all of these different jurisdictions, across all these different cultural, social as well, but more let's say stringently regulations and policy environment. So this is our thoughts on AI. And Kai's role is to invest and develop infrastructure to support this growth, both in Qatar and globally, as well as to think about and develop the tools that are needed for this deployment.
And you're not starting from scratch, obviously. One could use AI, the infrastructure, as I was hearing from the Minister before we took the stage, has been brought up to a very high standard, partly incentivized by the World Cup and so on. How far do you have to go in order to get to the level of infrastructure that you think is going to be needed to make Qatar a major player here?
We've done a lot of work on the software side already. We have a lot of in-country research and development programs that have been working on things like language translation and evaluation and agentic evaluation. So we've gone a lot in that path. The AI-specific infrastructure is unique, and it changes a lot with the new generation of chips. And so there's a lot still that the whole world has to do in order to put the right kind of infrastructure to support the deployment of the latest kind of technology.
Right, thank you. You partly answered the question I want to ask the rest of the panel as well, which is to the point of our title, and I'll come to Ankur first on this. I'd like to know what you each understand by the term inclusive AI and how we should go about building it. Ankur, let me come to you on that.
Well, I personally think the biggest risk of AI is not AI making mistakes, but AI quietly normalizing only one point of view. That's the biggest risk. So the whole idea of inclusivity is that is how? I mean, all of us are trying to do that in a different way, but I completely agree on that, what my esteemed panelist said. We are looking at world in we see it's in 2 different camps in Davos. You see infrastructure, people talking about compute, LLM, AGI, and rightly so, and those have been on forefront of the conversations worldwide. with all the large language models and so on and so forth. But the second, the layer above, which is the applied AI, the application of it, the knowledge layer, the process layer, the data layer, the applications, that's where you apply it. That's where people are trying to put AI to get work done, which is what my colleague here said, that we are trying to kind of do how we can work together. It is contextual AI. And while people are trying to, countries and everyone is trying to get their own LLM and own compute, which is rightly so, but we believe that kind of shaping that knowledge, that business, how work happens in the local context, that is how you kind of start removing bias. That is where you bring local context, local culture. The way a KYC process is done in Australia is very different from the way it gets done in the Middle East. It's very different from the way it happens in the US. That is where you bring all these layers in, which kind of forces the infrastructure layer to kind of understand and interoperate with the localized context. So for me, that is the fascinating part. And in the applied AI, we are seeing more and more conversations happen. So from automation and AI standpoint, we kind of work with enterprises worldwide to automate their processes. But we use agentic AI to kind of create now autonomous systems, where in an autonomous enterprise, you can take 30 to 50% to 80% of the process in an assisted and an autonomous way. But in that autonomy, you have to build observability, you have to build that inclusiveness. And that can only happen if we can, at the application layer, we invest in all these, remove that bias and bring local context. So we're very passionate about that, because if you work with businesses that are right, you have to understand local context. But you can't ignore, you can't be isolated from the global world. It's the interoperability that allows us to work.
Right, thank you for that. Rama, let me come to you and invite you to build up a little bit on what you've already heard and what's happening in Qatar on this topic. In particular, building on Ankur's point about the need to avoid a sort of monocultural AI that frankly answers to, people who look and sound like me.
Sure. Yeah, so first of all, I have the privilege of working under the umbrella of Qatar Foundation, which has for the past 30 years done a tremendous job in impact globally. Qatar Foundation touches the lives of the over 2 billion people that are not part of the internet. And if most AI models are being trained by content on the internet, then we're missing 2-point-something billion people's perspectives online. That is not to even take into account all of the others that, like you said, don't look like you, or that aren't part of the very polarized social media narrative. So there's a lot about culture, there's a lot about language, there's a lot about the way we lived as basic human beings that is just completely absent from the training of AI. And I think that's where inclusive AI is really needed. We need to be thinking about how do the communities that are not represented in this very polarized world of ours be a part of the AI journey.
And is this, just to follow up, for a country, a small country like Qatar, albeit with a lot of potential and a lot of resource, how easy will it be to influence even an Arabic language, large language model, for example? I mean, how easy is that going to happen?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I mean, we do see ourselves as stewards of culture and language and of people who don't have a voice as part of Qatar Foundation again. And the research and development that we're doing and the companies we're incubating right now at 300 plus companies that are working in building AI, building ed tech, health tech, we have a streamline of impact that is foundational, and we care very much about that, particularly since a few years ago, I think in 2023, TechCrunch wrote an article that said, when was the last time Mark Andreessen met a poor person? So you have to have the counter to that. You have to have people that are thinking about that, and we're fortunate enough under Qatar Foundation to have that mission.
Well, we'll go further into that as we get into the panel. Vinay, let me ask you the same question. I mean, you oversee a region for Wipro that we were talking earlier, Asia Pacific, India, Middle East and Africa. I think you said that's nearly 3/4 of the world's population just there. What does an inclusive AI look like from your perspective, and how might one go about building it?
Thanks for having me on this panel and including me on this panel, first of all. Being a leader of a technology services firm and leading a region as diverse as Africa to India to Asia Pac and Japan, Australia. One thing is very clear. I am seeing AI as the one technology that can really make a huge impact, not just in the economies of countries, but also in the lives of people. So I'm an optimist, and for that promise, and I separate the promise of AI from the proof of AI. The promise of AI that I believe in, and we all believe in, all of us who are in the technology services sector, we all believe in that promise. For it to come to fruition, it is about adoption of AI. And today when I talk to our clients, almost 90% of enterprises are dabbling with AI or are doing something on AI. But if you ask the same population, how much of that is being done at scale, and what is the ROI that you're getting from that AI, the answer, the number dwindles down to single digits in terms of ROI. And why is that the case? We've seen adoption being a huge challenge in enterprises and in societies as well. And for us to increase adoption, in the world that we are trying to get to, where humans and machines work seamlessly, hand in hand, it is imperative for AI to understand the nuance not just of the language, but also of the culture. And so, to me, inclusive AI is, is not. It's a necessity. It's not a nice to have. It is a must have. Because unless we make AI, and we as in technologists make AI inclusive, the adoption rates are going to be poor, and the ROI on AI is going to be abysmal.
So yes, if you like, a business necessity as well as a societal necessity, as Rama has said. Abdulla, let me come back to you because I can give you a chance to answer that straight question about what inclusive AI looks like for you. Maybe there's something you'd like to build on from what you've already heard.
No, I address that. So for us, it's some of the things that the gentleman was talking about, which is for AI to work, it has to comply with cultural, regulatory, policy norms. And this isn't, it's something as simple as your chatbot in a clinical health environment has to comply with your local health record, what are you allowed to say, what are you not allowed to say. It also has to fit in with how you speak to people in that specific region. If you have a diabetes AI chatbot and you're in a certain country, it has to know what are the cultural norms, where, if it tells you to go for a run or a walk or a swim, what makes sense in that jurisdiction. So it goes from the individual to the corporate to the regulatory. And all these things have to be thought through. Because remember, at the end of the day, the scale of this is for every dollar you're going to spend on infrastructure, somebody has to make $10, right? So if we're spending $1 trillion in infrastructure, there have to be $10 trillion worth of value that somebody's making. Otherwise, the whole, as he said, the ROI isn't going to work. So, if it's not just about chatbots that people go and use, but that won't justify the continued investments in infrastructure. It has to be about real business applications where you're making 10x, 20x because of your investment in AI, which means you really have to think, and the buck stops where the CTO comes, and he says, okay, now I need to connect this system to my system. And my system is already subject to all kinds of regulation. I have insurance, I have compliance, I have 1,000 things that all have to be addressed. So for me to make that investment and connect it to my systems, to my ERP, to my accounting systems, to my autonomous driving systems, to my chatbots, everything in the middle has to be solved. And this part is still is a work in progress. So I mean, there's a lot of work done on the models themselves. But then it's like the engine, right? So let's be building the engine. But now we're putting in the cars. And there's a chassis and there's all kinds of transmission inside. There's a lot of work left to do in all of that transmission and car building in order to actually do something economically productive with the engine. And without that, you're just not going to get the ROI on continuing to build engines.
Right, understood. And let me ask one follow-up question, and I'll also bring this back to you, Rama, as well. But I mean, there's obviously a question that we've not really touched on yet about skills, the people needed in order to build what's required. In Qatar's case, what is the kind of plan here to fill this, what may be a skills gap in finding the right people who can kind of contribute to building an inclusive AI?
We're seeing a lot of good talent in the region. We have universities with a deep history of computer science. We're seeing a lot of these graduates coming back and starting up their own startups. We're seeing the work that NCIT have done with some of their partner organizations has led to a lot of talent coming to Qatar. A lot of that talent is now beginning to leave and create their own companies. So I think the one thing about AI is that it's really democratized or reduced the barriers to entry for a lot of people. Actually, I see more talent in AI than probably any other advanced technology in Qatar. And part of that is because of the government's early efforts on the research side, in the Qatar Foundation, as well as on the deployment side with NCIT and what they've done. And so I think there's actually we're in a relatively good spot when it comes to AI talent. We're seeing a lot of interest, and I think a lot more will happen with the new programs that we've been deploying, with the Startup Qatar program. Over 1,000 startups have opened up in Doha in the last few years. A new residency program for tech talent. The QIA's Fund the Fund program, which deployed already $1 million over the last 2 years actually. So we're seeing a lot of excitement in the area and a lot of talent.
Yes, Rama, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, in addition to all of the great work that's being done by Startup Qatar and the other entities, we're also creating a lot of regional programs, and so acceleration programs for startups start in Doha, and then they go on to deploy in places like Egypt or Syria or other countries. Similarly, when we're running online hackathons, we're making them in collaboration with the over 200 partners that we have globally, so that the community is collaborating together. And we've seen founders come together from different countries and set up in Doha just because of that incredible kind of outreach that we're doing with the community.
Let me move back to you, Vinay, and just ask you to go into a bit more detail about what you think might be the challenges here of building these kind of culturally sensitive, multilingual, adaptive AI. What's the responsibility of CEOs of the corporate sector for helping to achieve this? Obviously, all of you have laid out the incentive to do it. ROI is going to be better if you can. What's the incentive then to get in at that stage where you have to actually build it?
It is navigating the complexities of the technology, but intertwining it with the humanness of organizations, right? That's where the biggest challenge lies. So in the future workforce, it is going to be a combination of humans and machines. Now, if that has to work, there has to be trust, mutual trust, and that's going to be the biggest challenge. How do you build trust, right? If I'm doing a part of a process and handing over to a machine, how do I trust what I have done is understood by the machine, or vice versa? How do I understand, what work the machine has done and how do I contextualize it in my market or my culture and work environment as well. It is that trust which I think is going to be the biggest challenge. And today, I'm a practitioner, so I know that the biggest challenge in adoption is this trust or the lack of it. And if there is one thing, I mean, we can talk about responsible AI all day long, right? Because there are guardrails and we've invested in responsible AI frameworks and what have you. That has not yet built the trust, which is the most important part for adoption to be driven at scale and for ROI to come as well.
Right. Do you want to pick up on that, Ankur, and just perhaps on the CEO responsibility or responsibility of those at the top of any company, board level like you are, to try and make sure that this monoculture that you warn against doesn't prevail?
I think, you've seen many technologies. I don't think so. This is one of the fastest moving technologies. Rarely a technology that has come that gets at the same time discussed in every boardroom and almost every kitchen table. It kind of creates a very... the challenge is that the institution speed is different than the speed at which the code comes out. So everyone is forced to kind of use it. And with every technology there is fear, and rightly so, it always is. But I don't think so paralyzing fear can, what it does is paralyzing fear takes innovation somewhere else. The key is to learn, key is to educate, key is to understand it. Because if you can understand it, then you can shape it. You can shape it for your company, you can shape it for your industry, you can shape it for your country. You can again bring it saying, what does AI deployed in my country or my company or my industry means, what guardrails I have to put, what governance I have to kind of make. If you go to a business leader, they know the governance and guardrails when we have designed. Now you have to design the same thing for AI working with people. You can't, it's not something that someone else will do from a boardroom standpoint, saying like we'll do the cool stuff and someone else will worry about it. That becomes part and parcel of the how you work. I also feel that the reskilling is also going very fast. People are doing this and at a very high scale. But there's a fundamental difference. The fundamental difference is that all our life, at least my life, when we studied, it was all about someone asks you the question, you answer it, and the more you answer, you are smarter. And as you grow up, you become wiser and you think it's not about answering, it's about asking the right question. And AI is forcing the whole world to say, what is the right question? Prompt engineering. I think so the journalists are pro at it, so you guys are fairly this thing. But that level, that reskilling, that fundamental shift at a business level, saying what can happen and why it can't happen. Now do it inclusive, govern, right for your business, bring all the data and the context together. I think that's the fascinating part. And that kind of, we are seeing so many fronts of, rarely a technology spoken so much, but again, rarely inclusivity, governance, reskilling has been spoken so much.
We come back to you, Rama, because we've heard discussion of guardrails and governance, and that inevitably leads to regulation. Where are the limits of regulation here? Because it's quite easy. We're starting seeing this within the European Union, the warnings that perhaps we're going to kill off innovation by having too strict limits on AI. Where, in a Qatari context, would that line be drawn, and how?
Yeah, so what His Excellency said earlier is we're light on regulation, but we're very heavy on education. We are encouraging our founders, as well as the larger community, to educate themselves, to look at, from the perspective of founders of AI companies, to look at how they educate their consumers, so that it's a partnership and not I'm imposing something on you and you're going to be, the product of AI, but rather you're going to be a partner with me as a driver for AI. Similarly, at schools, whether it's under K through 12 or university, how do we put students in the driver's seat? How do we make sure that when they are using AI, they're well informed enough to be building the next generation, not be kind of done onto by AI? And I think as we continue these conversations and this approach of just education, enlightenment, and curiosity, we'll put ourselves on the right track of regulation when it's needed.
So there's going to be need for some rules, though, presumably, before you can actually even start.
I mean, for sure, there are things that are related to safety and health that are being discussed at the highest levels, but then outside of those bounds of safety and health, it's really trying to enlighten ourselves of how to use it best.
Right. Let me just ask a final question to Abdulla and then I'll come to the audience, but I'm just interested in the notion of international partnerships here as a way that Kai might also help progress some of the ambitious goals that you've got. What's the sort of level of openness that you have to those kind of partnerships as a way of accelerating projects?
To think about deployment on global scale, you have to think about interoperability among different jurisdictions. It's very hard to think about being able to manage everything globally from one place. It's really about interoperability and collaboration both at the GTB level as well as at some levels the multilateral level is going to be very important to allow businesses to scale the impact of what they do across global populations. This becomes even more complicated when you look at access to compute. In many countries, for many reasons, will find it very hard to get access to the kinds of capacity that you need to run these applications, whether it's power availability, geotechnical, capital availability, and many other factors that can go into limiting access. And so then the question is, okay, how do you deploy healthcare or education solutions to the countries that actually where the impact will be greatest, where the greatest number of out-of-school children, or student or doctor ratio, or running clinics and so forth and so on. And we also don't have access to AI capacity. So there need to be a lot of thinking around interoperability. On the business side, we work with partners globally. We announced a JV with Brookfield to also look at the development of capacity globally. But the same approach will apply to the entire stack of things that we're working on, whether it's on the software, infrastructure, or even just on the, if you will, alignment between jurisdictions and this could become something like standards or best practice or some other things which the MCIT is also working on around cross-border partnerships and data sharing and data privacy, data protection, this kind of things.
Thank you. And now let me just see whether there are questions from the audience. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like to know more from our expert panel. Two hands up. We'll take the questions in bunches. So we'll take the gentleman here, so 4 rows back, and then the gentleman at the front here.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Dr. Rama. I'm a clinician, but I work at the intersection of policy and healthcare reform. So my question is this. How do we create policies, following the last question you answered, Rama, how do we create policies that encourage AI innovation without over-regulation? While still tackling disinformation and also ensuring that people take responsibility for how AI is being used.
How do we encourage AI innovation without over-regulating?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll just park that and we can bring the mic to the front and we'll just take the second question here. And then we'll answer both of them.
Hi, my name is Larry Adams. I'm the founder of a company called X-Stereotype, and we're actually building models around context. And one of the questions I have, this is in the US, what I found when I started this endeavor of context and cultural IQ for AI, there's no past research on it. The points of view from a data perspective were so limited, and the data that actually informs the large language models are really sort of antiquated and one-sided. How are you guys thinking about investing in creating new data? Because I think there's a lot of conversation around old data and processing it through AI and creating a lot, in my point of view, AI slop. How are you scaling up creating new signals?
Thank you. Rama, you'd like to take the first one? It sort of follows on from the question you responded to earlier.
Sure. So again, in the context of startups, I think it's good to put policies that encourage them to educate more than us putting regulation on them. We obviously have to get to know them quite well and work closely with them, with legal affairs, with other institutions that are relevant to their core business, like in the medical sector, the medical practitioners, and rely on existing policies to make sure that when they're translated into AI, they still work. But there's a huge part in education of the clinicians that are going to be using their technology, of others, so that you create that dialogue between the technologists and the clinicians and uncover weakness areas. And then it's an iterative process, like iterative development in technology. It should be the same for policy around AI regulations.
Thank you. And on that second question about the limited data, I don't know whether, Vinay, do you have views on that? How, with limited data, one might go about making or how do you construct or find the data? I'm no Arabist, but I suggest there probably is a lot of Arabic data in the sense of the set that could be fed into into an LLM. But I mean, I'm thinking about the wider question of culturally.
I think the question is more about using the data that we already have to train the models versus how do you create data that you don't have. And the reality today is the pace at which data is being generated or content is being generated is unprecedented, isn't it? So whether you look at it from the context of culture, language, or geographies, countries, industries, sectors, there is tremendous amount of data, and the best part about LLMs is that they have access to all of that data. That is number one. Number two is, despite all of this data and the LLMs having access to all of this data, there are some very good attempts that we know of that are being made to synthesize data, right, and extrapolate data. So, is there a lack of data, or is there an abundance? Is a question of perspective in my mind. I believe that any data that is used to train a model, has to be looked at in the context of either the market or the sector or what have you, or the language even, right? Some languages, as we know, are much more context sensitive. Some languages are not context sensitive. You go east and the context, weighs down on you, and you go west and the context is lighter. So, I guess the answer in my mind is it is not the lack of data that is going to be limiting factor for us. It is how do you use that data to train models and contextualize it.
Don't you feel that the aperture of data collection really does you can collect a lot of data, but if you didn't have the intent of understanding broader context, you can't send this. You have to go and invest money into it. So we work with Fortune 100.
Hey, sorry, I'm going to take another question, but I mean, just that follow-up. Perhaps you want to take it, that you can't necessarily synthesize the data if you don't have the original.
Yeah,
set.
it is the context that I think you are referring to, and that is what the whole topic of this discussion is about. How do you understand the context behind that data and not just look at it at face value?
Thank you. Thank you. Can we take this question on the second row? Any other questions in the room? And then we'll take one behind as well after that.
Nervous. So thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. My name's Katrina Young. I'm a professor, lecturer, and software engineer. I build AI inclusive algorithms. Something that I keep hearing, and I must say, I do it myself. There's been no talk around hallucinations and resetting the algorithms. They come during purpose. I've just finished building an algorithm that really gave me a headache. It began giving me bias slurs. So after I started programming it, it started talking in slurs. So if we have no data bank or data house around what is deemed ethical, whose perception is ethical, how are we mitigating that? I'd love your conversation because it's a struggle for me as an engineer and teaching my students of tomorrow how to approach that, build frameworks and build best practice. So I needed to get it in there. I was a bit nervous. I'm an engineer in the back end, but you're wonderful conversation.
No, you've been very lucid, thank you.
A slur. So of course, and this is the thing, I programmed it with a recipe. I'm multilingual, so my great-grandfather was German, mother Jamaican and Grenadian, and it started saying, "Hey Queen," and I said, "I'm intelligent, stop doing that." Socio-demographically, when I programmed it as being an engineer, I said, "Tell me what I look like," and it said, "A white male in jeans." And I was like, "I'm an engineer," and it gave me a salary of 50k lower than a normal engineer. I've got a space engineering startup, and the investment decks that it gave us predictions was lower based on my socio-demographic. So I am in the room, I'm doing it and I'm building it. I'd love what you have to say.
We'll just pass the mic to the gentleman behind you. We'll take a second question.
Thank you very much. My name is Kirill Rudi. I represent Eastern European company. We're a software engineering company based in Poland, around 4,000 software engineers, and we do business in MENA. We have office in Dubai, and we look at the MENA as the region. My question is to Ms. Rama Chakaki. What is the competitive advantage of Qatar and your science and technology park in terms of this AI race that's going on between Saudi, Emirates and Qatar? Why we should choose Qatar, and if we come to Qatar, why we should choose your park? Is there any specific about this comparing to other? Thank you.
Okay, let's take those two. Rama, you want to answer that second question first directly at you, and then maybe you have some thoughts about the ethical AI question as well.
Sure. So, I mean, every country is unique in the region, and we all have our specialty. And I'll reiterate, we're part of a larger ecosystem of Startup Qatar and others. But at the technology park, we are looking at tech with impact. And so, if you do care about that impact thesis, we are the place for you. That's number one. Number two, because of the culture of Qatar and the politics of Qatar, we are a magnet for neutrality. We're a great place for a lot of expatriated talent that's repatriating in the region. And so there's a beautiful pool of talent. And then there are a lot of other economical advantages for supply chain or other because of Qatar Airways and where it sits and other different advantages. We are going to be home to IMEC, one of the largest semiconductor research and development companies, and we're very excited by building an ecosystem around them, so that's another advantage for companies that are interested in building AI fundamental models.
Do you want to have a shot at the ethical AI question? Or?
I mean, that's what we're here for, aren't we? That's what we're here for. But yeah, they do hallucinate. I think from our approach is curiosity with intelligence. Like, we tell people they do hallucinate. Do not rely on them. But as far as how you build it without hallucinating, it's that insatiable appetite for data and guided data by the right people that count. So some of the people that have trained models in our community startups are refugees in refugee camps. Why? Because their voice matters. So whatever type of model you're building, you need to reflect on who's the audience for that, and do we have a representation on the build side to ensure that you don't get those insane hallucinations.
I advise government, I just want to say, how do you set the algorithm, or do you just advise people to just go along and just use it as it comes like a car?
How do you reset the algorithm?
Yeah, I think that's the narrative.
I mean, ongoing benchmarking is critical, and ongoing diversification of data sets.
Thank you. Let's just see if we can squeeze in two more questions. I thought I saw hands up here in the fourth row back. Yes, the two next to each other. We'll take both questions.
So, hi, my name is Tanisha Bolden. I'm from the States, and I have a son on the autism spectrum. When he got his diagnosis, I went back to school to get my MPH. And so now I use and leverage logic models and things like that, those tools and resources, building out programs around theories and models of change. So as you speak to building inclusive AI, are you leveraging scientific models such as you mentioned ecosystems? There's an ecosystem model, but what type of models are you using so that you can leverage your community and your assets in a way that you start to see impact?
Okay, thank you. Do you want to pass the mic and then we'll just take this as the last question?
Hi, I'm Jitske. I'm an anthropologist and founder of Human Dimensions, a small organization in the Netherlands. And I was just wondering, how do you make sure that we put oral traditions and indigenous knowledge systems within AI and the soft voices in the world, because they get lost in our conversations, but let alone lost in all our AI systems. So that's, to me, is a real worry. How do we do that? And how is there a big program on that?
Yeah, anyone like to answer that on that, Ankur? Do you have a view on the oral traditions point?
I spend my life with businesses, so I'm not going to hallucinate saying I know the answer. But I can tell you at least logically that this conversation is very close to our heart. And the reason is that any one model or any one way of doing things just doesn't work. So when you think of business, think of a healthcare company or healthcare provider in Middle East. Right? You don't want everything to be trained only on local things because you don't want to be isolated. You don't want global because then there's only one view. The key is interoperability. So that is one. B, from a business standpoint, we understood that the focus is language. Language is very important. Everyone is focusing. Key is reasoning engine. We talked about context. How do you contextualize? Once you have all the data, you have the process, you apply a reasoning engine that takes that and reasons and adapts. So that is what we kind of are building for enterprises. So when I said I'd not hallucinate on this side, but what I believe is that more and more models, with more countries taking participation, active participation, they bring these kind of questions, and I believe they will be building this level of their heritage. They'll bring the local context, the local culture into their localized model. When internet came, people thought there's one thing. It all starts with infrastructure. It all becomes application. And application is all about interoperability. Any application that just works on its own has never succeeded in the history of technology. So I do believe, and again, I'm not an expert on pure large language model. I use it to drive business with it. I do believe that there are large language models, there will be country-specific models, and interoperate all of them will make it better. It has to. Otherwise, one worldview, I think, says the biggest is not AI.
Abdulla, you'd like to probably final word?
To build just on that and touch on a few things. Again, I'll go back to the model itself is an engine. And you can't reset it. It cannot be reset. You always have the bias in it that was No, but I mean, you can't reset somebody else's model. Yeah. So this is an engine there. Now, what you do is you take the engine, you can do lots of things with it. And you can think about the specific risks, the specific issues, the specific context. And it's not about the data, it's about the questions. And that's where the challenge is to really think through and be like, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to solve a health problem? Am I trying to make somebody better connected with old tradition? Am I thinking about what is it that I'm trying to do? What is it that I'm trying to change in the real world? And by the way, that's regulated anyway, so you're not adding regulations. It's already, the world is regulated, right? There are rules, there are contexts, there's society, there's people. And you have an engine, and then you think really hard about the risks, the issues. And as you said, you start to build the relevant data set that you then build in, and you start to contextualize this engine, that's the transmission, to get it to actually move the wheels. And so this part, some of it is on the infrastructure side. There's a lot on the infrastructure side, on the tooling. There's a lot of it on the startup side and how they think about these tools and how am I going to get X done while avoiding all the risks, all the issues, while thinking about the questions and then finding the right data sets and applying them in different ways, from third-party eval model, through rules, through guardrails, there's 1,000 ways. By the way, this is the part of AI that hasn't been solved yet, right? So the engines, everybody's working on engines for a while, nobody's working on the transmission, and that's where the value will be, whether it's for society or business. So I reckon, it's not about people are building engines and we have to live with those engines and there's nothing we can do about that. It doesn't matter. There's 11,000 models that are hosted on Microsoft today. Each one of them is going to be very, very, very different, but it doesn't matter. It's how do we get value from these models and how do we actually use them to deploy or do whatever it is that we need to do.
I think we're just about out of time. I do thank you for your excellent questions, which have raised lots of questions for me. A whole load of new panels we could spawn from this, just to tackle each of those questions. I'm sure our panelists will be around if we haven't quite nailed any of the answers. Do come along and chat to us, but please put your hands together to thank our experts.